I was nervous. I practiced that song. The last time I practiced it, I sang that song, I was thinking, just don't mess up the last note. I think I got it, so that made me happy. That was good. Turn your Bibles. Enough with that. 1 Peter chapter 2. 1 Peter chapter 2, when you find your place, I invite you to stand this evening. First Peter chapter 2. I'm just going to read verse 1 and 2 to get us started this evening. It says, "Wherefore lay aside all malice and all guile and hypocrisies and envies and evil speakings, as newborn babes desire the sincere milk of the word, that ye may grow thereby." Let's go ahead and have a word of prayer. Lord, I do want to thank you for tonight, Lord, for the opportunity we have to be able to meet in your house, the opportunity we have to be able to open your word and to hear from you. Lord, I pray that you will speak through me, help me not to get in the way of what I believe you have for us this evening, Lord. Let's use this time. Pray this in your name. Amen. You can go ahead and be seated. I'll let you know kind of right off the bat, I'm going to be on our series this evening, but the title for tonight's message is simply this: Stunted Growth. Stunted growth. And I have kind of an odd, at least not typical for how I would try and typically do an introduction, but I think it helps kind of set the tone for the message. It's pretty commonly understood that there are things that can stunt growth, things that would hold us back from growth that either would naturally take place or growth that ought to take place. We can see that in a few regards. Physically speaking, I will readily admit, brief research, but I did some brief research for this. A few things that are commonly known to stunt growth. Malnutrition is known that it'll stunt a child's growth. That makes total sense. If a child isn't getting the nutrition that's necessary for their body to grow, then it won't. The entire process of human growth is pretty amazing when you think about it, how your body takes nutrients from food that you eat and turns it into what your body needs in order to stretch itself. It's kind of crazy sounding. I remember in science as a kid, reading about how all of that works, and it's really amazing when you think about how God designed our bodies, that you eat and your body takes that food and strips down the necessary nutrients to support growth. But it makes sense then that if you're not giving it enough of those nutrients, then it can't fuel growth. If I know that my body needs certain nutrients in order to grow, it makes sense that if I then starve my body of those nutrients, it won't be able to. Another known to stunt growth, and I found this kind of interesting that it was in the same study, but they had it listed this way, was genetic disorders. That there are genetic disorders that can cause your body not to absorb nutrients. There are some that they can eat all of the right things, but their body's not turning it into the fuel needed. Study that I read for tonight also claimed that a cause of stunted growth, or a known cause of stunted growth, can be stress. If a child is faced with too much stress, it can cause their growth hormones to shut down. Your body kind of goes into survival mode, and it knows it's in a weakened state when it's growing, so it just won't. There are things that we know stunt growth. There are things like that we know do. And then there are things that people speculate may stunt growth. From what I could find, and again, I readily admit, brief research. So if you have an argument with this, keep it to yourself. It'll ruin my point, so don't mess me up again. From what I could find, though, there are no facts proving this, though I am sure that some in here may argue it, but it is speculated that too much junk food can stunt growth. For years, when I was growing up, people told me that coffee stunted growth. I decided it was worth it anyways, and I'm average height, so it's okay. Maybe if I didn't drink coffee as a kid, I'd be, 6'6". I don't know, but it was worth it. But we understand, physically, there are things that stunt your growth. If you look at it maybe professionally, there are things that can stunt a person's growth in their career. If in a person's career, they want to move up. I was having this conversation with someone pretty recently that there's something wrong if a person has a job and is just happy, I'm going to stay in the lowest position my entire life. Most people don't want that. Most people want to advance. They want to grow. They want to take on a new position. But there are things that can stunt growth. A person's mindset can stunt their professional growth. If a person has the mindset they can't, then they're right. If you think, well, there's no way I could ever achieve that new position, then you're right. You can't. I am not a power of positive thinking type person, but I do think a lot of people defeat themselves before they ever try something. They decide that they'll fail before they ever try, and because they decided they fail and no one wants to fail, they just never try. So they stunt their growth. A lack of drive can stunt growth. Growing takes work. That's why a growing child is always tired, because growing takes work and it wears a person out. Growing in your career doesn't just happen. It takes work. To be willing to do that work, a person has to have a certain amount of drive. There are things that can stunt our growth. I know this is an odd introduction. Just stick with me here. I have a reason for this. There are things that stunt our growth in relationships. Relationships with people. Any sort of relationship with people is meant to grow. The more that you get to know that person, the more you spend time with that person, the more the relationship grows. However, there are things that can stunt that growth. If you're a closed-off person, you're going to stunt the growth of a relationship. It's hard to grow close to someone who's closed off and won't talk. If you are a dishonest person, it will stunt the relationship. If they have to question whether or not they can trust you, it's going to make it pretty hard for that relationship to grow. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about relationship as in a friendship or relationship between coworkers or a spouse or any person that you have interaction with. There are things that can stunt growth in every aspect of the term. Now, again, I know kind of a strange start to the message, but here's the purpose, and we're going to kind of get to this right now. Spiritually, and I say this often in messages, spiritually, we need to grow. It does not matter where you are spiritually. It does not matter if you are a spiritual baby. You need to grow. It doesn't matter if you are spiritually mature or if you just, view yourself as spiritually mature. You need to grow. Because things were not meant to be stagnant. You ever notice that? Anything that is stagnant is a bad thing? I tried. I could not think of, nor could Google think of, anything stagnant that's good when it's stagnant. Oh, it goes bad when it sits stagnant. Goes bad when I say, brother, you're going to try and confuse me again. Don't do that to me. Things go bad when they sit stagnant because things are meant to grow. The passage that we started in tonight talks about newborn babes' desire to grow. We saw that in chapter 2, verse 2. As newborn babes desire the sincere milk of the word that they may grow thereby. Talks about that newborn babes desire the milk of the word that they may grow. Now, think about this. A baby that desires milk makes very sure that you are aware that they desire milk. We right now in our church have a few new babies and more on the way. A baby that is hungry makes sure that everyone within earshot, and even if you think you're without earshot, you're probably not, they make sure that everyone that might possibly hear them knows how much they desire that milk. And if you don't give it fast enough, they're just going to keep getting louder and louder to make sure that you know just how much they desire the milk. The passage is telling us that it ought to be that your desire to grow spiritually equals the desire that a baby has for milk. Now, I'm not saying we all need to start, crying in the room because I want to grow so bad. But I am saying that desire needs to be there. I'm saying that desire ought to be there. So as we get into the message tonight, let me ask you a question. and don't answer out loud, but do you desire spiritual growth? If the answer to that is yes, then why do we allow things in our life that stunt spiritual growth? If we really desire in my life that I would grow spiritually, then why would I allow myself to do things that are stunting that growth? I mentioned coffee. When I really started drinking coffee, I don't remember who it was, but I had somebody who made this big deal about, you're going to stunt your growth drinking coffee. Well, at that point, I was 16 years old, and I was 6 foot tall. And my response to them was, 6 foot tall is a pretty good height. If it stunts my growth and I stay here, that's fine. No. I was willing to do that because I was content with where I was growth. But if I desire to grow spiritually, why would I allow anything that might stunt that in my life? This passage gives us 5 things that'll stunt your spiritual growth. 5 things that if you desire to grow, we need to, as the passage puts it, lay aside. We're going to go through those this evening. First, malice. Look at chapter 2, verse 1. Wherefore, laying aside all malice. Now, malice, I'm going to, as we go through this, I'll let you know this now. I'm going to kind of give definition of all of these words, because often they're ones that either we don't use often, or we use and don't know what they actually mean. Malice is defined as intent to do evil. Seems obvious, right? If I want to grow spiritually, well, of course I'm not going to have an intent to do evil. The two are kind of diametrically opposed to each other. You think about it, the battle between good and evil are like the most iconic storyline of all time. You can look at almost any storyline in a book or movie, fact or fiction, true story or not, and you can see the storyline over and over, good versus evil. Right now, for some reason, our world wants to paint the picture of that the bad guy is the good guy, and somehow being a rebellious bad guy who fights what is perceived as good makes you a hero. This is a total side note, but worth saying. That storyline of the bad guy is a good guy is trying to make you question what's right. We wonder why our kids have no respect for police or authorities. It's because movies make the police and authorities look like imbeciles and the bad guy look like a hero. That has nothing to do with the message, but worth pointing out. The fight against good versus evil, though, is about the most common storyline of all time. So this idea of the intent to do evil, because I can see someone saying, well, I know that, and I don't do that. I know that I ought to strive to do right, and the things that are evil, I don't do those. I'm not saying that we are perfect at it. Paul said that the good that he would, that he does not, and the evil that he would not, that he does. And I know I'm paraphrasing that, but if Paul struggled with it, I guarantee we do too. But malice is not talking about the evil that you do, though you don't really want to. Or to word it more simply, malice is not the accidental evil that you do. Remember, it carries the word intent. That's different. So let me ask you this. Again, don't answer out loud. Do you ever badmouth somebody? Because if you are intending to do them evil. I know we all, have our excuses. We'll say things, well, I just needed to vent, or whatever else we try to use to justify it and make ourselves feel better about it. But the only thing that serves is to tear them down, both in your eyes and the eyes of the person you're talking to. You are intending evil on them. And think about this, you're hurting all sorts of people along the way. You're tearing down the person that you're talking about, hurting their testimony and hurting them, often without them even knowing it. You're hurting the person that you're talking to as you're being a stumbling block for them. I don't know if we think about that often, but when we include someone else in our backbiting, we're being a stumbling block for them and their growth. And you're stunting your own spiritual growth. Do you desire to grow? Lay aside malice. Number 2, guile. Again, we see that in our verse, and all guile. Guile means sly or cunning behavior. Sly or cunning behavior. So I'm going to tell on myself a little bit here, but my parents have already heard these stories, so I shouldn't get in too much trouble. And in theory, at 36 years old, I shouldn't get in much trouble with my parents at this point anyways. So I think if there's any stories that I tell that they don't know, I think they know all these. Growing up, though, I was, not proud of this, but it's true, I was a sneaky kid. I always said that's why I was good at working in junior church, because I knew that normally the kid that you saw get angry and hit someone that was sitting next to him probably wasn't the one who started it. The kid next to him had been poking him for the last 20 minutes, and finally he had it. And I knew that because as a kid, I was the one doing the poking. Until finally whoever was sitting next to me got mad and swung, and I'm like, teacher, did you see what he did? I'm not proud of it. I'm just admitting here, I was the sneaky kid. It seems like every kid goes through a phase that they want to write on the walls of their house or write on the walls of somewhere. I don't know why that is, but it seems to be right when they're learning to write, and that, giant white wall looks like a big piece of paper, I guess. I don't know, but every kid does, or at least considers it. But if you have parents who are doing their job, when you write on the walls, you get in trouble. Because while every kid wants to write on the wall, it's a bad thing to do, but I was the sneaky kid. And I figured out that writing my brother's name, Bo, is a lot easier than writing Caleb. It's less letters. I mean, that's simple. So I would draw on the wall, and I would sign it in my brother's name. It made sense. And then when my parents would find it, Bo would get in trouble, and he would deny, and that, Bo, your name is on the wall. Yeah, Bo, your name is on the wall. He would get in trouble, not me. Sly, cunning. Again, I'm not trying to glorify that at all. Please don't take it as that. I'm making light of it, but it's not a good thing. Here's the thing. It's pretty rare that being sly and cunning is used as a good thing. Usually, if you're being sly or if you're being cunning, it's because you're trying to get away with something that you know you probably shouldn't. You're trying to get away with something wrong, something that you know I really shouldn't be doing or I shouldn't be involved in, so I'm going to try and be a little sly about this. That's what guile is. Here's the problem. If we're saying we desire to grow, that sneaking to do wrong stunts your growth. If I'm spending my time doing the wrong things, then in turn I'm not using that time to learn how to do the right things. You desire to grow spiritually, lay aside guile. Number 3, hypocrisies. We'll see that in verse 1 as well. I know that I've kind of defined a lot of words, but it's good for us. This word to me, the meaning was interesting. Hypocrisies means claiming to have moral standard to which one's behavior does not conform. Claiming to have a moral standard to which one's behavior does not conform. Hypocrisy is when, you say you're going to live a certain way, or you say that you believe a certain thing, but what people see about your life doesn't match. Most of you know me well enough to know I have a sweet tooth. I try to limit it, but I love sweets. This last potluck we had, Brother Oakes brought, some sort of delicious pumpkin fluff, and then there was cookies next to it, and I thought, fluff with cookies, make a fluff sandwich, and I did, and it was amazing. But you know that about me. Any of you who know me know I like sweets. I definitely have a sweet tooth, especially ice cream. It's like my weakness. I like sweets. You know that about me. Any of you who know me, my family could all readily tell you this. If we have desserts at a potluck, I'm going to eat it. I'm going to come to the potluck saying, I'm going to try not to eat sweets. And then I come out with a giant plate of dessert. Hypocrisy would be simply this. If I got up here and made the claim, I eat no sugar. Because I can make that claim. But you all know that what I'm saying and what I'm doing do not align. Hypocrisy is something that a lot of people will claim is the reason that they don't go to church. That you'll hear people that, I don't go to church because churches are full of hypocrites. People who act as if they're something special or act as though they are super spiritual, but the way that they live shows something else. I'm going to be honest, that's why I pretty often will say something along the lines of, we're all just sinners saved by grace. Because there's not one of us that's perfect. I personally am trying to live for God to the best of my ability, but I'll admit I'm not perfect at it. For tonight's message, though, for a moment, I want to look at this a little differently, because remember, we're looking at this as things that stunt our spiritual growth. Well, how can me being a hypocrite stunt my spiritual growth? And it's really quite simple. Did you know that if you lie to yourself enough, you can convince yourself that your lie is true? It's a proven fact that if you tell yourself that your lie is true, and if you go into it knowing this is a lie, but if you tell yourself my lie is true, long enough, your brain will eventually believe that your lie is true. Spiritually, we can lie to ourselves enough about where we are spiritually and that I'm doing good and God and I are in a good place that you'll start to believe it. We can lie to ourselves and say, well, I'm a pretty good person, and tell ourselves that lie long enough that we start to believe it. We can tell ourselves long enough that the sins that I'm involved in, they really aren't that bad, and tell them to ourselves long enough that we start to believe it. And when we start to believe that lie, that the sins that I do are not that bad, and that we're more spiritual than our life displays, and that our relationship with God is fine, even though we know it isn't, we stop growing. Because we don't think we need to grow. We're pretty good. You want to grow? Lay aside hypocrisies. Number 4, envies. Envy is feeling of discontent. Notice the last part of this definition, longing to have someone else's possessions, qualities, or luck. We struggle with contentment. And in some areas, I want to kind of specify this. In some areas, we should not be content. We're talking about growth. We should not grow content as in complacent with spiritual growth. And that's really the distinction. We typically put contentment and complacency as the same thing. When it comes to, when it comes down to it, complacency and contentment are two totally different things. We should not grow complacent with where our spiritual growth is. But when it comes to most areas of our life, we need to learn contentment. Happy with what God has given us, not requiring more. But notice also that definition, I tried to point out the second half of it, it goes beyond just discontent. It's not just that I want more than I have, it's I want what you have. It's not just that I want more possessions, but I want your possessions. Not just that I want to have that ability that I don't, but I want your abilities. It's something that we all struggle with. We see someone with a new car, and we think, well, why can't I have that? Why can they have that and I can't? We see someone with an ability that we don't have, and we get mean-spirited about it. Rather than praising the Lord for the fact that they have that ability and that they're using it for God, rather than even trying maybe to improve the abilities that we have, we get mean-spirited as if, well, it's not fair that they get to have that ability and I can't. Why didn't God bless me with that? I have heard people, funny is what I was going to say, funny but sad at the same time. I have heard people, when someone is singing a special, who are almost upset in their seat because, well, why wouldn't God bless me with talent like that? It's envy. It's envy. It's in fact one of the 10 commandments, if you remember. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. It's envy. Envy will stunt your growth because when you, as the definition says, when you long for something, you're focused on it. When you long for something, it consumes you. So you're focusing your attention, rather than being on growing spiritually, rather than being on your relationship with Christ, will be on, I want what they have. You want to grow? Set aside envies. Lastly tonight, evil speakings. Again, verse 1, wherefore laying aside all malice and all guile and hypocrisies and envies and all evil speakings. Evil speakings is defined in this verse as slander or gossip. Slander is something that is prevalent in our world. Often people have the mindset that the easiest way to work yourself up any sort of ladder is by tearing all the people that are above you down. You can make yourself look pretty good without actually having to do much of anything if you can just make everyone else look really bad. It's common in our world. It's common in the business world. Honestly, it's common in families, and sadly, it's often common in churches. It's evil speakings, gossip. These go hand in hand, but can have some differences. Gossip, talking bad about someone behind their back. And I'm just going to say this. There's no reason for it. There's no excuse for it. There is no way that you can grow spiritually and gossip. If you are going around speaking evil of others, if you feel the need to tear others down, you are stunting your growth. Not even touching on all the hurt that you're doing to them, you're stunting your own spiritual growth. So, conclusion this evening, try and kind of tie all of these together and all of this together. I want to ask the same question I asked at the start of the message, the same question I've tried to kind of put in throughout the message. Do you desire to grow spiritually? Stay true to form with our series. The only time you've heard it in the message, I think. If you desire to grow spiritually, you have a choice. The passage gives us some pretty clear-cut things that will stunt the spiritual growth of a Christian. And just to be honest, some things that we're pretty often guilty of. We desire to grow spiritually. If we desire, as again the passage, as newborn babes desire the sincere milk of the Word, if you desire to grow spiritually, there are some things we need to lay aside. We need to lay aside those things that stunt our growth. Lay aside malice, guile, hypocrisies, envies, and evil speaking. Let's go ahead and pray. Lord, I pray that you will, Lord, help us first off to have that desire to grow. Lord, help us to have a desire to have a constantly growing, constantly maturing relationship with you. Lord, a relationship, a desire for that relationship that causes us to want to lay aside anything that might get in the way of that. That causes us to want to lay aside anything that's going to stunt that growth or be a stumbling block in that relationship. Lord, I know tonight we kind of covered a large list of different things here. I think things that often are applicable for all of us, that we struggle with. Lord, I pray that you'll help us tonight to make the decision that our relationship with you, our spiritual growth, is important enough that I need to lay some things aside. It's in your